Welcome to the Connect with BMC Helix webinar series. During today's event, you will be able to ask questions of our panelists. The question and answers, along with today's broadcast, will be published to our YouTube channel. Today's topic is BHOM migrating to 21.3 Helix Platform. Martin Tauber will take us through this content. Over to you, Martin.
Hi, and welcome to this webinar on migrating from TrueSight Operations Management to Helix Operations Management. My name is Martin Tauber. I'm a solution architect working in the Platinum Engineering Group here at BMC and focusing on migration utilities from TrueSight Operations Management to Helix. What are we going to take a look at today? Well, first of all, basically, when people think about migrating from TrueSight Operations Management to Helix Operations Management, the first thing that comes into your mind, at least if you're a technical guy, is like, oh, what utilities does BMC provide to help me migrate from TrueSight to Helix Operations Management? Yes, this is one part of it, and we're going to focus on it. Yeah, we are providing utilities. But this is not the only part that we have to take a look at. Yeah? When you migrate, the migration is going to be a project. We are providing additional functionality. We're going to see that in later on slides. So you will have to think about how to plan and prepare to successfully migrate from TrueSight and Helix Operations Management. Sorry about that. We also provide utilities to help you do the planning. We also provide you guidelines to help you do the planning, and we're going to take a look at how what does BMC provide here. What else do we need to do? Of course, operations management is lots about collecting metrics and events on the one hand side. TrueSight customers usually or very often are using petrol agents to collect metric information, and we'll take a look at how do I prepare these petrol agents to be migrated to send metrics to Helix Operations Management. Migrating from TrueSight Operations Management to Helix Operations Management is a project, or as we call it in this slide here, a journey. So how do we make this journey successful? Well, I hope there's no ambulance during that journey, like in my recording, but to not have the ambulance in that journey, we divide that journey into three phases. We divide it into the plan and prepare phase, the build and validate phase, and the consume and operate phase. In the plan and prepare phase, we focus on where do we currently stand in TrueSight Operations Management, and where do we want to be when we implement Helix Operations Management. And of course, how do we get there? What do we have to do to get there? BMC provides best practices to generate this plan, and it provides utilities within these best practices to support building this plan. And we're going to take a look at that in some further slides. The second phase is the build and validate phase. We understand where we want to be, and now we have to implement that. To implement that, we have other questions that we have to solve, like sizing questions if we build things on premise. Like how do we get things that we implemented in TrueSight Operations Management into Helix Operations Management, the migration utilities. And we're going to take a look at that later on in this session. And the third part is the operations use cases phase. We're running Helix Operations Management, but we still have some problems to solve. How do we, for instance, promote policies, things that we created in Helix Operations Management in our development system to a production system? How do we update passwords in a large environment and things like that? And we're going to take a look at that as well. So let's directly jump into phase one, the plan and prepare phase. And there, especially the use case planning. The use case planning focuses on what do I want to achieve with that product? What goals do I have? How do I get value out of the product? The more value you get out of the product, the more successful your project is going to be. Looking at Helix, Helix has added lots of functionalities to enable customers to get more value out of the product. So we have things like IT operations management, AI ops, simplified service modeling, intelligent integrations, intelligence automations. So there we have made the product more added more functionality to the product to help you get value out of the product. So things that you did in TrueSight a certain way, you might do that differently in Helix. Things that you weren't able to do in TrueSight until now, you might get a solution in Helix. So it's very important to really understand where do I want to be and how am I going to do that with Helix Operations Management. So the goal for a successful migration project from TrueSight to Helix is not running TrueSight within Helix, meaning having the same functionality in Helix that you have in TrueSight. The goal is to get the maximum value out of Helix with a reasonable amount of effort during the migration, and to keep that migration efforts in a reasonable amount, we're providing the migration utilities. So let's take a look at the key areas to focus on during the plan and prepare phase. First of all, there's the technical side again, like the events, the metrics, the logs that we are collecting. What sources do we have? We have to take a look at that. We have to think about how we're going to integrate these sources into TrueSight Helix Operations Management. And second step, as we already talked about in the slides before, is the use case deliverables. What do I want to achieve here? Yeah, we've got some key items here that we're looking at, like event noise reduction. Yeah, event noise reduction, saying like I don't want to be bothered by noise in my events. How can I achieve that? And that is, for instance, a point where TrueSight differs from Helix Operations Management. You might have done that differently because you didn't have the functionality in TrueSight that you would do it in Helix Operations Management. Things like probable cause analysis. How did you do that in the past? How can you get the value out of the product in TrueSight in Helix Operations Management? Service modeling, service management, intelligent automation, solving problems automatically or reacting to problems automatically. All these use case deliverables have to be defined, and you have to think about how are you going to implement that. And the third part is the design and build. Of course, we understand the sources we understand what use cases we want to deliver. We have to think about how we're going to implement that. That is on a technical level, of course, saying like how do we build the architecture, but also on a configurational level, saying like how do I configure the system so it meets my requirements. So besides the best practices we've been talking about to implement a successful project to migrate from TrueSight to Helix, now let's take a look at the solutions and the tools that we provide to support these best practices. So the first tool we're going to take a look at is the TSOM Health Check tool. The TSOM Health Check tool is a tool which we use during the plan and prepare phase. It shows us what the status of the current installation within TrueSight is. It checks the health of the TrueSight product, but it also provides us with lots of additional functionality which is useful for planning and preparing the migration. So we will understand, or we get from the TrueSight Health Check tool information about what products are installed in the TrueSight environment. What petrol agent versions do we have there, which is important for the migration? What remote monitoring are we using? Which KM versions are we using? CIs count, cells performance, things like that, to be able to plan for the sizing of the installation. The list of KMs stored in the repository, cell information, CI information, and tenants. So the health check tool gives us a good understanding about what is the current state of the TrueSight installation. The second utility we want to take a look at is the Event Management Analysis utility. In Helix, event management has fundamentally changed. We no longer have the concept of cells, we have the concept of having one scalable event management. With that change, we moved from a code-based rule engine to a no-code or low-code based rule engine, which of course gives us the problem on saying, like, how do we migrate the code that was generated in TrueSight to rules which run within Helix. We know that lots of our customers have spent lots of time and money in building these rule bases, so we want to provide them a way of migrating these rules to Helix. And the Event Management Analysis tool is the tool which supports this migration. We're going to go into details of that tool later on. So the third utility we want to take a closer look at is the TSOM to BHOM Configuration Policy Migrator. The Configuration Policy Migrator basically focuses on migrating monitoring configuration from TrueSight to Helix. What configuration data are we looking at? Of course, we're looking at things like the CMA monitoring policies, where we configure how monitoring works in the TrueSight environment and migrate that to Helix. The utility also looks at agent and server-side thresholds in TSOM and migrates them to BHOM alarm policies, so that we have as the same alarming in BHOM and in TrueSight. And it takes a look at blackout policies configured in BHOM and moves them, migrates them to blackout policies in BHOM. Of course, it looks at the blackout policies in TrueSight. So it majorly focuses really on migrating the configuration for monitoring to BHOM. So it's a day one utility, but it's also a day two utility. Day one saying, okay, we're doing the migration. Day three, we're running in production. Since it provides functionality to promote this type of configuration from one BHOM system to the other. So you could have, for instance, a test system or a development system where you develop these types of policies, the blackout policies, the thresholds, you test them, you say it's okay, and now I want to export these from the system and import them into my production system. And the configuration policy migrator will help you do that. So besides the tools that we've been just looking at, which were focusing basically on the plan and prepare phase of a migration project and the validate and build phase of the project, we also provide tools for the third phase of the project when you're running your system in production. These tools help you fulfill certain administrative tasks. Things like updating the patrol default account, or updating forward proxy for the patrol agents. We provide connectivity testers to ensure that you can test connectivity between a host and a target system. Can you reach the BHOM system from that host? Stuff like that. Configuration reports that give you insight of the current state of your BHOM installation, so that you get an understanding about what solutions are deployed, what devices do I have, and things like that. So now that we have an overview of the tools that we provide, let's dive a little bit deeper into the tools and see what they actually do. To get a good understanding about the current state of the TrueSight environment, we have the health check tool, which we already been talking about, and we're going to take a small look later on. But we also have our best practices on collecting data from customers. And one of these parts is the questionnaire that we send out to customers. The questionnaire will give us information about, for instance, the sizing of the environment, saying how much CPU do you use, how much RAM do you use, how many events do you get, how many devices do you have. Things like, what does your cell architecture look like? Yeah? These are the things that we collect manually via the questionnaire, things that we can't collect through the health check tool, or which are add-ons to the health check tool. We also have questions about the installation environment. If the customer wants to install that Helix on-premise, it has to have certain prerequisites, like what Kubernetes version are you using, stuff like that. This is the stuff we collect with the questionnaire. We ask the customer to run the health check utility in its latest version, so that we get information about the environment. So we understand like how many agents do they have, which agents versions are they using, which KMs do they have deployed, which KM versions are they using, what do they have deployed, things like that. Things that are relevant to plan a successful migration. After collecting all the data from customers, especially the event knowledge bases, the event policies, now let's take a look, or a deeper look, into the event management, analysis and migration utility. The goal of the event management, analysis and migration utility is to make the migration from TrueSight to BHOM of event management as smoothly as possible. As you might know, the event management has significantly changed from TrueSight to BHOM. In TrueSight, we had a cell-based, code-based event management rule engine, and we migrated that to a microservice-based, highly scalable, low-code rule engine within BHOM. Which means, first of all, the rules that you wrote in TrueSight can't be just imported into Helix. So what does the tool do? Well, first of all, the tool reads the entire knowledge bases of customers, and it reads the entire policies of customers. With that, we get a good understanding what the customers are actually trying to achieve with that knowledge base. So usually we see like, okay, we've got a rule sets for this and this type of integration. We've got rule sets for another type of integration, SNMP, whatever, you name it. You have a rule set for managing blackouts. You have a rule set for managing notifications. You have a rule set for creating incidents and all that stuff. And with that utility, which is a browser-based utility, you see the screenshot on them on the slide, we can get a good understanding what are you actually doing with a knowledge base. Okay, so we identify the different areas, the different use cases you want to solve with the knowledge base. The other thing is what we do is we analyze the rules from the perspective, could we automatically migrate them? Saying we know that we understand the rules, we're reading the rules, could we just dump them and import them into TrueSight? Of course, it is not a one-to-one migration. And I've been talking about that. We solve things differently in Helix than we do in TrueSight. So sometimes it doesn't make sense to say like, okay, we're going to do that like that. We have different technologies. Yeah, TrueSight was was built for on-prem. Helix is built with focus or with a capability of running in a SaaS environment. So things like, we're calling an execute to run something, is something that works in TrueSight but will not work in Helix. So we would have to provide a different solution for that. So besides of giving the overview of the knowledge bases, the different use cases the customer is trying to solve, we look at, can we migrate these rules or can we not migrate these rules? If we find issues migrating these rules, we will show that. As you can see here, we've got different bubbles indicating, well, we have a problem to migrate that because this functionality is no longer available. In the case on the screen, we see like, okay, obviously we have a slot or a property in an event which has been reduced. everybody knows, or people who know work with the event management know, like we've got lots of slots in the core event. Do we need them all? We reduce that. So this might be a problem that you would have to think about how you're going to solve that. In which slot are you going to carry that information that has been used there? So we get a pretty good understanding of where the problems are if we take the approach, let's automatically migrate these rules. The second thing we do is we identify the problems, of course, first thing. Second thing is we give the problem a severity. So we say like, okay, we found something which is more difficult to migrate. And depending on the severity, is like there's an easy solution to it or there's a more complicated solution to it. Giving you an understanding what the effort is to do the migration if the migration is not possible to do automatically. The next thing we do is we have a large base of knowledge articles. Over 200, I think, knowledge articles of possible problems that could occur and the solutions to these problems. So if you run into a problem, if the analysis tool gives you an indicator saying something is wrong here, not wrong here, something we identified an issue, you can click on that problem and you will get a knowledge article on showing you what the workaround for this issue is. So for instance, in execute rules, you go like, we don't have that. You would have to maybe look at intelligent integrations. You might look at automation or something if you can solve the problem using a different technology within Helix. The third thing, so we get the overview, get an understanding what customers do with the knowledge base. We identify what we can do automatically. We identify the issues that occur if we do it automatically. And the third thing that we see here is we give you an overview of where the problems are. So sometimes it's like, we see that here in that example, the customer is using lots of MC parameter. Let's find a solution for that so that we can get rid of all these issues and then migrate these rules automatically. Currently, state today is we do the analysis. We are prepared for doing the migration because we understand the knowledge base. We understand the policies. So in a targeted future release, we want to be able to have that migrate button saying, you're clicking on that, we're going to migrate that. We're currently working on that, but we don't have that scheduled yet. So there might be cases where we find that event management is blocking us from migrating. So customers might have used event management to the edge where it uses functionality that we currently don't provide in Helix. Nevertheless, we discussed about the use cases, the value you get when migrating to Helix. So that would be bad if we would hinder you from migrating because you have issues in event management. For that reason, we have created the Intelligent Integration Cell Gateway. So the Intelligent Integration Cell Gateway basically is a piece of software that allows you to keep your cells on premise, keep event management on premise, or some of the event management on premise, and keep some of the integrations on premise and forward these events to Helix. So that is the easy path. Let me put it this way, the easy path of migrating event management, saying like, okay, we did the analysis of the knowledge base, we're happy, we can migrate everything, we don't have to think about this thing. We have certain things, maybe certain technologies that are currently not supported with an integration to Helix. We can use the cell integration connector. So how does this basically work? You keep the cell as is, or some of the cells as they are, on your on-premise installation. We have built a connector for intelligent integration. This intelligent integration picks up the events and forwards them to Helix. So the cell integration is one way of migrating and keeping the event management or certain parts of the event management on premise. The problem with that is that normally if you would have a cell on premise, you would need the whole infrastructure from TrueSight to manage these cells, like the TSPS, like the TSIM, and all that stuff. That would have a large footprint. We don't want that. We want to have a small footprint, and this is why I invented the event viewer. The event viewer, why do we need the event viewer? So we have the cell, we have the events in the cell, we're forwarding these events to Helix. Operators would be sitting in front of the Helix console and working there. Nevertheless, for administrative purposes, we need to understand, like, how were the events processed? Was the event passed from the integration to the cell? All that stuff on the day-to-day basis that you need to do administration. You need a view into the cells, and this is why we created the cell viewer. As the exclamation mark shows, it is actually only for administration and debugging use. It's not for production, so it's not for production in the sense of you have your operators sitting in front of the cell viewers. It is really for administration purposes only. It's a one user only, no roles. So you log into the cell, you have got a password, you can change the password, you can query the cells, you can see the events, but there's no role-based access control, really for viewing the cells only. It's an assistant tool for the migration, that is it. And it's a read-only tool, so there's no changing of events or of the data. You can query events of remote cells, so you can see what the events look like. You can query the DDA tables of remote cells, so that you can get an understanding how is my cell configured, all the stuff that you need for your daily work to do administration of cells. It's a browser-based application. It's a small footprint. Basically, it's one jar file that you have to get on the remote cell or on one of the cells and start that jar file. That jar file includes a web server, and then you're able to connect to that web server via a browser. So it's designed to be as simple as possible. Must be installed on a remote cell installation. So it needs certain it needs, for instance, mQuery to query the cells. So it needs to have access to certain executables of the cell installation to be able to query the cells. And where you install the remote cell, the event viewer, you have to have access to all the cells that you want to view with it. So it doesn't have to be installed on every remote cell. It just has to be installed in one place where you have access to mQuery and from where you can reach all the cells that you want to view. So here we have a screenshot of the event viewer. As mentioned, it allows you to see all the cells that you listed in the mCellDir. You see that on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you can see the events in the columns. As you see that, you can see details of events in the bottom. As soon as you click on an event, you can open an event to see details within the list view. You have the possibility to select additional columns that you would like to see in the display view. On the right hand side in the columns field, you have the capability of selecting the time range when you want to see the events. You have the capability of selecting the event class for which you want to see events, and as you see, like in the status equals open, you have a little query editor so that you can edit the query that you want to edit the query to see the events that you want to see. As I mentioned, with the event viewer, you can see the events, like the name says, but you also can see the content of the DDA tables. So we have got two modes here, one for viewing the events and one for viewing the content of DDA tables. They look very similar. So this is what you currently see on the screen. It's basically one data table called Ben Products Categorizations and the context of that data table. The thing that I want to put the highlight on here is you have got nearly the same fields for selecting data of the data tables as within the events. So you can choose the class or you can enter a query. What you don't have, of course, is the time range, because data doesn't really have time ranges. The data view automatically adapts to the data that you're looking at. So while the event view was showing you things like messages, severity per standard, that doesn't really make sense for data views. So it really shows you the information, the relevant information of that data table that you're looking at. Nevertheless, you have the possibility, like with the event view, to choose exactly the fields that you're interested in. In the event and the data view, we have the capability of filtering. So you click on the filter button, and the filter opens, and you will see the different icons here to the different filter icons to filter from the events that you already selected. Besides showing the events and the data, you get information about the cell. So how is the cell performing? How many events did I receive? All that stuff. And details about the cell, like HA mode. Is it switched on? Is it switched on? On which cell is it currently in the HA mode? So with the event viewer, you have a good tool to administrate the cell, view, get insight of the event management, of the TrueSight event management, without the need of having a full-blown TrueSight installation. So our path to success to migrate is really saying, like, can you migrate the knowledge base and get rid of the cells? We are happy with that, you can go on. If we see problems because an integration is missing, some functionality within the rule base is provided which is more difficult to migrate, we offer the temporary solution saying you can keep the cell and migrate everything else to Helix. So this doesn't prevent you from starting a migration project. So we have a path of migrating event management from TrueSight to Helix. Now let's take a look at the Petrol agent, which is responsible for collecting metrics. What do we need to do there? To migrate to Helix, it is recommended that you use the agent version 21.2, 04 or higher. The intent is here to say that the Petrol agent with this version is capable of talking to TrueSight, but it's also capable of talking to Helix. So doing a migration project, you first would upgrade to an agent version equal or higher to the recommended version. You could run that in your production system with a TrueSight system and then move the agents from TrueSight to Helix by reconfiguring the agent. So basically telling the agent not to deliver the data to the TrueSight system, but to deliver the data to the Helix system. That is done via configuring an API key and configuring the agent integration services variable as you're used to it when you were switching from BPPM to TrueSight. And now it's similar mechanism from moving from TrueSight to Helix. So the important information here is the agent from a specific version can connect to both systems, TrueSight and Helix. The second thing we recommend doing is having a proxy server between your agents and the Helix system. So if you're using SAS, this is a recommended way of doing it. You don't want to directly connect your agents to the outside world. So you would have a proxy system which the agents connect to and which then would connect to the outside world to deliver the data to the Helix system. BMC supplies a Squid proxy that you can use, but you can use any other forward proxy to do the same task. So we have been looking at how to migrate event management from TrueSight to Helix. We have been looking at how to migrate the metric collection from the Petrol agents from TrueSight to Helix. We already talked a little bit at the beginning about migrating the configuration from the monitoring configuration from TrueSight to Helix. And I wanted to give you at least a screenshot or an idea how the BHOM policy migrator looks like. So the BHOM policy migrator is a command line utility that allows you to, as we said, migrate monitoring policies, promote monitoring policies, export monitoring policies within a BHOM system, all from the command line. So let me summarize this session. We have been looking at the migration from TrueSight to Helix. We first looked at it from the perspective saying it is a journey to migrate from TrueSight to Helix. We must understand where we are and we must understand where we want to be. It is important to understand where we want to be because the idea of migrating from TrueSight to Helix is not changing the technology underneath. It is looking at what value can I get out of the product. Having said that, there's no one-to-one migration. There's no press the button migration. We have to look at the different parts within the migration and evaluate each part by itself. BMC provides utilities that help you on this journey. We have the health check tool, the questionnaire tool to understand where you're currently at. We have the configuration migration utilities, which help you technically move configuration from TrueSight to Helix. We have the event management analysis utility and the cell integration, as well as this event viewer that help us migrate TrueSight event management knowledge bases to Helix rule bases. We have the patrol agent, which is capable of delivering metrics to either TrueSight or Helix, which makes the migration easy. All these tools are focused on making the migration as easy, as smoothly as possible. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And now I'll take us through the self-help in contacting BMC. The YouTube channel where this webinar will be posted is available at this link. It contains past webinars as well as a rich set of how-to videos. The Connect with TrueSight webinar schedule that contains future webinars as well as our past webinars is available at this communities link. And to contact technical support via web, phone, email, as well as these social channels are available through these links. That will conclude our session today. Thank you for attending.